Coming up on this episode of the IoT Inc Business Show.
What we're taking is what is reasonably complex technology, and we're saying we're going to put it in these everyday devices that have to be 100% reliable, right? If you walk up to a light switch and the light doesn't go on, you don't think, geez, I wonder if my internet connection's down. I wonder if the network was busy right now. You think the bulb is out. That's the only choice. And so the consumer paradigm around these devices, be it in the home or in your workplace, is they have to work every single time.
There are 5 main IoT alliances, consortiums, and groups focused on the Internet of Things, and I interview them all. The Thread Group is focused on the home and believes that, like 802.11 with Wi-Fi and 802.15.1 with Bluetooth, a third radio, 802.15.4, is in need of a group to support it. The easiest way to think of Thread is that it is the Wi-Fi for low-powered networks in the home. Sound like Zigbee? Well, it is, but the antiquated Zigbee doesn't stand a chance. In this episode of the IoT Inc Business Show, I discuss the Thread Group with Skip Ashton.
All this and more on this episode of the IoT Inc Business Show. The people, the business, and the technology of the next generation internet. This is the IoT Inc Business Show. And now, here's your host, Bruce Sinclair.
Hello and welcome to the IoT Inc Business Show. This show is made possible by sales of my book, IoT Inc, published by McGraw-Hill, and the IoT Inc Certified IoT Professional, or ICIP, online training and certification program. Become a certified IoT professional by completing the program's 3 courses: ICIP Technology, ICIP Business, and ICIP Strategy and Digital Transformation. Details of which can be found at www.iot-inc.com. That's www.iot-inc.com.
With me today on episode 10 is Skip Ashton. Skip is VP of Software at Silicon Labs, where he's responsible for the software for their MCUs, Zigbee, and their short-range wireless chips. He's also Vice President of Technology at the Thread Group. The Thread Group is a not-for-profit organization responsible for Thread technology, education, and certification. Skip is the man when it comes to Thread technology, so obviously we're going to have to do some deep dives when we get a little bit further into the discussion. Skip, thanks for joining me today.
Glad to be here, Bruce. Thank you.
So why Skip instead of Augustus? Man, that's cool.
The old family nickname. Yeah, you can't call kids by their real names, right?
So is it a Greek name, or where does it come from?
It's an old family name, so I'm actually the third. So
the third,
yeah.
And you didn't want to keep that. I think that's like powerful, man.
I even tortured my oldest son with it just to carry it on.
Oh, you did? So there's a number 4.
There's a number 4. Poor kid.
But he's not going to use it though.
He goes by Augustus.
Good. So he's bucking the trend then. All right. Well, tell me a little bit about yourself and your background in IoT.
Sure. So I actually started at Ember Corporation here in Boston in 2003. And at the time, we were actually working on a proprietary mesh networking technology. We had a couple of founders, Andy Wheeler and Rob Poor, that came out of MIT Media Lab working on some DARPA funding for mesh networking, and seemed like a good idea for these kind of connected devices and things like that. And we quickly realized that having a proprietary standard isn't a very good idea because you really can never grow into a large market, and that we needed to go standards-based. And we looked around, and 15.4 radios were just coming to the forefront, and Zigbee was really getting started. And so we put ourselves into Zigbee because we really believed in a standards-based approach. And so I, little by little, somehow these things creep up on you. Got dragged pretty deeply into the standards development effort, making that work, helping get it organized and driving that. And we've been very successful at that. And Zigbee's, pretty widely deployed today in a lot of connected home. There's, well over 100 million devices out there on Zigbee. And
that many. Wow.
And we've shipped, quite a few of those. And so we got purchased by Silicon Labs, and a few years ago, started getting involved in Thread with some of our lead customers because they were really looking to move to an IP-based standard for the home. And there's been a number of attempts around this, but none that were really quite successful that you've seen taken off in any sort of widespread deployment. And so really our customers asked us to get involved and to drive an IP-connected stack that would fulfill their needs in terms of network scalability, size, latency, throughput, the things they're used to in these kind of consumer interacting devices, because it's a pretty demanding application when you get right down to it. And so now it's not enough that I be involved in the Zigbee standard and all the connectivity there, but also spend a fair bit of time on the Thread standard.
So yeah, I mean, I was going to challenge you a little bit on the Zigbee standard thing. Now you guys moved away from Zigbee because you're saying you wanted to standardize on IP.
Oh no, we still are deeply committed to Zigbee, and we have a huge amount of customers both involved with Zigbee and shipping Zigbee products. Some of those customers would like to be on an IP-based stack, and some are perfectly happy staying on a Zigbee stack. And obviously Zigbee does the job. It works well. It's interoperable. There's a good certification program behind it. But we can't pick any one thing here. We have to respond to the market.
Right.
And so we have to offer that range of solutions.
Now, the market, responding to the market, does the market understand, I guess, the difference between, in your view, understand the benefits of going to an IP-based solution?
I think that's been a bit of an education program, and it depends deeply on the customer. And today, and I think you can see with the kind of fantastic uptake of the Thread group and the Thread efforts, that people really are understanding what's happening there and jumping in. We just had our first Thread members meeting. We had over 50 companies there, over 100 people. Nice. And for something that got launched, announced last summer and really launched for membership in October, to be up over 100 members now and have 100 people show up, over 100 people show up for the first members meeting is quite a testament to how much people were asking for an IP stack in these spaces. But of course, Silicon Labs is in the business of shipping product, and my customers are in the business of shipping product. And it's a little unfair to compare a Thread stack that is, coming out now, and we have customers working on it with, the Zigbee Pro stack, which really came into kind of widespread use with Zigbee Pro's launch in 2007. And so it's been out there a long time. We know it. My customers know it deeply. They know its pros. They know its cons. They know exactly how it behaves because it's got a lot of miles on it. And so they take a very mature approach. They have to keep shipping into the marketplace. And when it's appropriate, they'll shift over to an IP-based stack, if they think they need it for their marketplace. New people coming along obviously take a different view. They say, wow, I'm building a new product now. I should just be on IP. Right. Yeah.
And why would I want to be siloed?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so I guess that is a good data point, is the uptake in the Thread group. So, that's a good segue. I guess at a high level, what is the Thread group? Can you describe that to our listeners?
Sure. So Thread is a not-for-profit organization, and it's really around the market education of this Thread networking stack. So we're completing the specification development and the certification program so that we can get products certified. They can carry the Thread logo, and we can assure interoperability of these. But a lot of what Thread is doing is the marketing and promotion and outreach to people on the benefits of this and why using an IP stack for this kind of connected home is a good idea. And of course, a lot of that is, using the existing IP infrastructure, but it's also taking a fresh look at the stack and the simplicity of it, the security of it, these sorts of things. And this has been the underlying challenge that, as we put it, looking at the world and this IoT marketplace from the things aspect and not from the internet aspect. And,
okay, what does that mean?
Well, the interesting thing is what I call the tyranny of simplicity. So, and this is really difficult. So how often have you tried to hit something on your web browser and it said not available? or have you dropped a cell phone call? And you think that's perfectly normal, and it is today, right? Mm-hmm. And how often when you go to a light switch do you expect it to operate? And, my house is about 9 degrees today because we're having a little cold before our next storm. Do you think my thermostat should run all day today or just most of the day? So what we're taking is what is reasonably complex technology, and we're saying we're going to put it in these everyday devices that have to be 100% reliable, right? If you walk up to a light switch and the light doesn't go on, you don't think, geez, I wonder if my internet connection's down. I wonder if the network was busy right now. You think the bulb is out. That's the only choice. And so the consumer paradigm around these devices, be it in the home or in your workplace, is they have to work every single time. And that's the simplicity of it, right? It has to be easy to install. It has to be easy to use. We want a high level of security so that 14-year-old down the street can't hack your system. And we have to bring all these things together in a way that manufacturer, that guy who's used to making light switches, who may not be the most experienced RF engineer and may not be too familiar with, IP mesh networking or security protocols, he needs to embed that in his light switch, and it needs to work properly with, bulbs and fixtures from lots of different manufacturers, right? Mm-hmm. That's a challenging task, and there's a reason this hasn't been done, and the reason why it's taken some real work to get there.
Yeah, it sounds like a vision statement. So who's involved in the Thread group? I mean, who came together? Maybe just give our listeners an idea.
Yeah, the original founding companies was ARM, Big Ass Fans, Freescale Semiconductor, Nest, purchased by Google, Samsung, Silicon Labs, and Yale Lock, part of Assa Abloy. And then in addition to that, those 7 founding companies, recently Somfy and Tyco have also joined the board of directors. Two pretty strong product companies that also have an interest in, the growth and expansion of Thread.
Now, where did the technology come from? Is there original IP that's developed by Thread, or did you take technology? And we're going to dig into this, but it just seems like those 7 founding members, are they the ones that contributed the technology?
That's right. So those 7 founding members are the ones that are completing the original specification before we turn it over to the Thread group.
Okay. All right. Now, the focus of the Thread group, you've been talking about use cases of turning on switches. It seems like the members respect the locks. Is it focused entirely on the home? Is it a little broader in view? What's the scope?
We've really started by looking at the connected home. That's been the focus. It's a huge growth area, as you can see. Everybody wants to talk about it, and all the retailers are putting connected home devices in. And, we've really seen a massive shift in the marketplace in terms of consumers' expectation of connected devices in the home. You see it with wearables and things like that, which obviously use, some higher bandwidth connections, although battery life is still critical for them. But, you saw it, just a few years ago, Philips launched the Philips Hue light bulb, right? And it's been, by all accounts, very successful. And in that you get 3 light bulbs and no switches. And so my question to you at your house is, how many bulbs do you have that don't have switches associated with them? Because I suspect...
Just the ones over the dryer that are sitting there.
And so, that really is kind of the paradigm shift that we've seen, that it's okay to sell light bulbs and have the smartphone be the control point. But in reality, you still need switches, and people want that. And if you're not home with your phone and somebody's visiting you, they still want to be able to turn the lights on and off when you're not there. And so, you have this kind of paradigm shift where the traditional, M-to-M communication of device to device, let's make it simple, make it efficient, but that now has to be paired with this device to cloud, device to smartphone or tablet interaction, because the consumer absolutely expects both, right? It's great that the switch works, but my smartphone better work with it too, right? Or my tablet.
It's part of the deal.
And so, that just wasn't the case, even 3-4 years ago, right? That, it was kind of a cool thing, and now it's completely expected. And so, I'd like to be able to talk to my light bulbs and my appliances and my home security system. I can log in and talk to my thermostat and my smoke detectors, and, that's just normal.
Yeah. So go back to the group, and what is the output of the group? What is the purpose of the group, and what do you produce?
Sure. So we are going to release the specification this summer, the initial thread specification, as well as the certification plan, and have the certification up and running. And then the real other purpose of the group is around the promotions, the marketing activity, education of both developers and consumers, and these sorts of things, right? And so, you see this, the one that people compare us to the most is the Wi-Fi group, right? So obviously, they're doing a lot of promotional activities. You do a lot of plug fests, making sure people understand how the products work. But you're doing a lot of education, outreach, making sure people understand what the logo means and how to use it, and so the consumers get used to that.
So you said specification. You did not say standard. Why don't you clarify?
Yeah. So I'm used to using the word specification. I can't help myself. So to be fair, what we're building is based on as much as possible existing technology. So we're referencing IETF standards. We're using IPv6, obviously.
Nice.
And 6LoWPAN for that, because nobody
love
wants
it.
to carry around IPv6 addresses. But what we've had to do is really optimize that for these kind of 15.4 lower bandwidth, low power networks. Right? You're okay if you charge your cell phone every day, but you're not going to do that with your door and window sensors. So we need years of battery life on these sorts of devices. And what that really means is, through every layer of this, 15.4 was built for low power. 6LoWPAN does okay with that. There were some optimizations there. The routing layer and reliability of that, and packet sizes. Obviously, IP technology isn't often built for small packets and efficient communication. And so we really tried to optimize all the way through the networking stack and things. And then, when you get up to things like using UDP, UDP is UDP. We all know what that means. And then using things like DTLS. And again, because we need to communicate to these other devices, you don't have much flexibility in changing things like that. You have to use what's available. If I'm going to set up a DTLS session with the cloud, I can't do it in some odd way. I have to set up a DTLS session. Right.
So again, so what you're saying is, okay, we're collecting the standards and we're using the standards as they exist the best we can, but then maybe we're specifying versioning, maybe we're making slight modifications to are we making any modifications to the standard? Yes. Or you are making it to the standard?
Let's be honest, any good standard, be it the IEEE standards around the MAC-PHY or even the IETF standards, have many, many options in them. Which is great for getting a standard done and terrible for interoperability. So you end up, down selecting to what you actually need to support to make these networks perform well. And you very clearly specify that. And things like the routing layer, we didn't use the Ripple routing that IETF came up with for their kind of low power routing because we felt it's too heavyweight for the home. And so we're using a routing mechanism that's more akin to RIP, but RIP is, the message format. We can't say we're using RIP because that's associated with particular packet formats and things. So we're using much of the algorithms and the techniques from that, but it's optimized for these 15.4 networks in terms of the packet format and those sorts of things.
Okay, no, that makes sense. So, I mean, you're basically specifying a configuration of existing standards. You're then maybe tweaking things and building some glue, and then you're calling it a specification. Yep. Now, again, is it a semantic issue, yes, or am I just getting hung up on it? Is it a standard, or is it or not?
It is a semantic issue. It is a standard, and I think
it's an internal standard. I mean, it's just right? Or is this going to be put in the public domain?
The thread group, will be the owners of that standard, and so it's accessible to all the members within that within the Thread group, and they can use it. Obviously, there's a number of semiconductor companies already working on their implementations, and there'll be more. There's a number more that have joined. And so it's going to be pretty widely available. And so, it then effectively, is 6LoWPAN a standard or what is it, right? If we're using that and how we configure it and things like that. So it's more of a semantics game from our standpoint of we're using IP technology. We want to be able to seamlessly connect over Wi-Fi, off to the cloud or off to your phone and things like that. And we're trying to make sure we can do that.
Well, I think what's important is not so much, what we call it, but is that, developers can feel confident that it's not going to change or that it's, built in one specific way or that there's a process for this change. Right. I mean, that's the important thing. And I agree with you that, specifically I have a lot more experience in the IETF standardization process than the IEEE, but there's lots of different ways to use them. There's lots of different versions, and they're generally built standalone, and so you need to connect them all together in some way. Yeah. And so I think there obviously is a real valuable place for this. I just wanted to just get it straight.
People don't think about that, right? So, the clearest case for people when you explain it to them is, the IEEE radio, right, has a wonderful FiMac, and it has a way you can ask what networks are around you. And IETF has, develops routing standards so that when you're on a network, it knows how to route. Okay, right. Well, how do I bridge from, hey, there's 5 networks around me to, if I was on a network, I'd know how to route, right? That joining process is something that has to, as you say, it's the glue between the layers that says, oh, no, I need to be on this network. The user is asking me to be on this network because this is his home, and those other networks are some other neighbor.
No, exactly. I think that makes sense. All right, so go back to Thread. How does the group make money, and where is it spent?
Yeah, I mean, we can't really get too much into the specifics there, but, Thread is membership-driven, right? And so, we've had a lot of companies join, and,
Is it public information, the different levels, or is it private?
The membership levels are available on threadgroup.org, and so it's from that standpoint, it's pretty straightforward. It's all out there in public. How it gets spent, we're still, as I said, we just launched the organization last summer. Where we just had our first members meeting where we got the committees organized, and we've got a certification committee. We've got a use case committee looking at new areas and new markets and the applications and things. And we've got a ecosystem committee that really looks at the marketing and the promotion and the speaking opportunities and trade shows and things like that. And so we're really, with these meetings this week, getting that whole process kicked off and getting all that member input. And, it's great to see all these new people coming in and really excited about getting involved and driving Thread out there into the market.
Well, maybe another way, and I can, if you don't know them off the top of your head, I can put them in the show notes, the actual membership levels. But maybe another way to look at this is, why would a company want to join? What do they get in return for their membership fees?
Sure. So, they get access to all the other members. So, if you look at many of these networks and things, right, people are making a piece of the network and they need to interoperate with other devices and things like that. And so the way you do that, right, is you need to meet other people. And so maybe I want to make a device, but I need a border router. Or, maybe I make switches and I need to talk to lights, and I want to talk to lighting companies, or vice versa, right? And so, these companies want to get together and talk about it, understand how other people are using the technology and how best they can use it, right?
Super valuable.
Yeah, and so that networking, that getting together with people, how are they using it? What are they using it for? What are their ideas around it? And so that's very important for people to be able to do that. But similarly is the outreach to these shows, outreach into the marketplace so people understand what Thread is, how it's being used, and things like that. So we have different membership levels. There's an affiliate member, right, that receives communication. They participate in the general meetings and stuff. They receive the final deliverables and things like that, and that's a $2,500 membership. The
Okay,
the contributor members can participate in these work groups. They access the draft deliverables and vote in these committees, and so they're helping to drive the policies, the procedures, the processes that we're putting in place, what shows are we going to, and that sort of stuff. And so those contributor members, that's $15,000.
Okay.
And then sponsor members are on the board, and so in addition to all those same things, they're also helping to drive the direction of the board and initiating work groups and approving the final deliverables, approving the operating budget, and that sort of stuff. And that's $100,000.
Okay. So going to the value, one, I mean, you're the networking. I agree with that. That's super valuable. Second is there's going to be value that you're going to be putting into the Thread brand. And so indirectly what they're getting if they do use Thread is being able to use the logo. And we'll get into certification after that. The third thing, what I'm hearing is different levels of contribution to directing where the technology goes and maybe how it is marketed.
That's right. Absolutely. People want to get involved, right? Companies want to stay at the table.
They definitely do. Now, what I'm interested in is how are members, whether they're affiliate, contributor, or sponsor, how do they influence decisions? You were saying there's some separate, I don't know if you call them working groups or
so there are these different committees, right? The certification committee.
Okay.
The ecosystem for the kind of marketing and promotion, and the use case committee over looking at different application areas, those sorts of things. And so any of the contributor or sponsor members have access into those committees. They can volunteer, and like any organization like this, what you get out of it is quite often what you put into it, right? If you show up and listen, then the meeting's not going to be as lively as if you show up and contribute, and And so, we're just starting that process with the Thread members, but we had a lot of lively discussion this week over, where things are going and what's the best way to get there and stuff. So really getting us started off on the right foot.
Now, how are, in terms of decisions, are they voted upon? And if so, what's kind of the mechanism? Is it a one company, one vote? Is it my company votes 10,000 or 100,000 versus 15,000? How does that work? It's a one
company, one vote. And then all the final deliverables have to get approved by the board also. But it's if you're a member, you have a vote as a company.
Okay, so you could be a member of a number of different committees, and then you'd have a vote in each of those different committees.
That's right.
And then the caveat here is the board, though, can overrun or can overrule those votes?
Yeah, I mean, the board has to be responsible for the overall direction and oversight of the group, right? And so the board, and this is pretty normal in most standards committees, the board has to approve final deliverables.
And are they involved? I'm assuming then there's going to be board members that are involved as these decisions are being voted upon, so that they're not going off off target and kind of struck down.
If you look at what happens, these board companies are making a heck of an investment, right? It's not that they're just paying to be board members and sit in those meetings. They're bringing more members from their companies who are sitting in these committees or chairing these committees. They are deeply involved, right? Companies don't do this lightly. They tend to get very involved.
Yeah. Are some of the companies contributing manpower as well?
Absolutely. You
like to what extent? No, full-time people?
All of these, I think we all get to do it as part-time jobs, but I mean, all of the board companies have a number of people that typically come to these meetings that are participating in these committees, and we're just getting started. We'll see how that that works out. But normally, and we've done this in Zigbee for years. You see it in the Bluetooth SIG and other groups, right? These board level companies are investing people's time, normally on a part-time, but sometimes on a full-time basis to really help drive these groups, drive the deliverables. That's how this stuff happens. There is no standing staff of the Thread group. Work is done by the volunteer members and their desire to get work done.
Oh, okay. So so the money is not paying any full-time, I guess, Thread employees?
No, we have a management company that helps to manage the website and organize the meetings and that sort of stuff. But that's, we don't have full-time employees of the Thread group that do this every day. It's all volunteers.
Volunteers and lean and mean then.
Yeah, I mean,
not threadbare.
That's right. Most organizations tend to run that way, right? There's not a.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, well let's talk tech a little bit. Let's switch gears. So you were describing earlier, but maybe Thread, from what I understand, is a networking protocol, but that can be pretty overloaded. Can you maybe encapsulate what does Thread cover?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, let's go there.
So Thread really is built upon a standard MAC-PHY. It is doing the mechanisms to join the network and the commissioning process. It's doing the routing for the network and that routing maintenance and things like that. The basic security of the network and rolling keys and all those sorts of things. And error recovery, but what it's not doing is application layers. So it truly is a networking stack, very much like Wi-Fi, except for really low power devices. Right.
Okay, and so not a networking stack, and uses existing radios. Is it just the 802.15.4,
That's right.
or does it work with other radios too?
It's currently just on 802.15.4 at 2.4 gigahertz. Right.
Okay.
So, that's an international band. It's pretty much available around the world, so that makes it nice and easy.
Okay, so it's sitting on top of that radio. Yep. Great. It's doing routing, signaling. It's using IP, which is great. Now, on top of that is sitting an application layer.
That's right.
Now, would CoAP be there, MQTT, or what would be sitting? What would you find sitting on top of Thread?
We're using CoAP as part of our management framework for some of the communication between nodes from a management standpoint, and obviously Thread does not specify the application layer, but we see a lot of people wanting to use CoAP in some of these applications. But the truth is, the way you have to think about this is, I have a lot of customers. There's a lot of companies involved in Thread, and there are many application layers out there.
Sure.
And Thread doesn't care what application layer runs over it. Now, the flip side of that isn't really true. Applications care what stack is under them, because, right, if I build a light bulb on Thread, and it's using 6LoWPAN and the Thread routing and Thread security and things like that, and you pull down an IP stack off of Kentucky and build a light switch with it, even if we put the same application layer on, well, your switch is probably not going to talk to my light because we're using a different networking layer. So the applications care deeply about the stacks, but Thread as a stack is happy to run different application layers, which is really nice in today's market, where there's a fair bit of discussion of what is the most appropriate application layer, and different markets may have different needs, right?
Sure.
So, commercial buildings may look at using BACnet in the U.S. or KNX in Europe. We obviously have a lot of customers on Zigbee who would like to understand how they could run Zigbee over something like a Thread stack, because the Zigbee application layer is so rich. But you go to Asia, and Japan uses Econet Lite for some of their in-home communication for some energy and things like that. And the Thread stack really doesn't care what is running on top of it, right? We're just sending the messages. Fair.
So that makes sense, because you're in effect, you blur your eyes and you're a networking protocol, networking layer, and so you're fitting in between there. How are developers accessing Thread? Is there a RESTful API? Is it a different type of metaphor? What's the mechanism for actually using it?
Yeah, I mean, it is generally a RESTful API. So developers currently get access through some of these original members who have software out there available for people. And so they can start their development on that. Now, until we release the final specification, it's not really Thread yet. So we're in the final kind of testing and validation of the specification and the certification such that it'll be available this summer. And, only then can I actually call something Thread, right?
Okay.
So anything I have now is just test code
pre-Thread,
getting ready for Thread. That's right.
What is the projected 1.0 release date?
June.
June. Yeah. And are you hoping to have certification up and running by that time as well? Okay. Well, then let's move into certification. We were talking about the value, some of the value that members would be getting. One of them is obviously having that certification. What's the process? How are you going about it? What are the parameters? Maybe just talk us through certification a little bit.
So Thread is already, we went out with a proposal and took bids looking at how best to go do this. And we selected UL as a lead test lab. They're developing a test harness that'll be used for certification as part of it, and we're developing that as part of these interop testing events we're doing now. That test harness will actually be available to all members so that they can test their product at home before they go to the lab. So, nice. So in theory, going to the lab should be really easy.
Yeah.
If you run it at home, it should run the same when you go to the lab.
Of course.
And so, that's a real benefit to members. People don't like spending time in the lab or having to go back to the lab if things fail. And so having the harness available makes everybody's life easier, rather than trying to exchange products with people. There are other ways that people try and get around testing so that they make sure their product is okay before they have to go in for certification. So certification is a key value. It's a core component to make sure that test harness has good coverage, are tested well and interoperable. And if there's problems, we want to identify those problems and update the test harness accordingly so that we can roll out updates to it to all members and say, we got a new test here because somebody saw a problem. And so really we want to make sure that is just one of the key components of Thread and using the technology is that your device is going to be interoperable when it joins the network, goes through the security and commissioning process, and starts to participate in the network, that there is not going to be field problems there. It's going to be interoperable.
So tell me then, what does it mean? So I go to the store and I see a light switch with some light bulbs, let's say, and it has the nice Thread logo on it. So I feel pretty confident. I then go a little bit further down the aisle. I see a smoke detector. It's got the same logo on it. I go a little bit further down. I see some cameras and so forth. So, what is the meaning of the logo? What is it? What can the consumer expect?
Yeah, and so the basis of the Thread logo and the premise from our standpoint within the Thread group is that you're going to have a common experience. We're going to make it simple to use, easy user interaction for joining the network, for getting on the network, and it's going to connect seamlessly to your phone, to your cloud services, whatever way you expect to interact with a device. And so, the consumer doesn't really expect that his light bulb is likely to communicate with his camera if they both had a Thread logo on it, right? Because they don't have a lot to say to each other. But he would expect the light bulb to talk to the light switch, right? But what we want is a common experience of how do I get these on my network? How do I know they're behaving properly on my network? And that we can get this data off the network to your phone or to your cloud service or however the user chooses to interact with it.
Well, maybe I'm jumping to conclusions, but since the Thread is really a networking layer, will there even be a Thread logo on consumer devices? Because that doesn't really, like you were saying about the cloud, and because we didn't talk about the radio either. But what is that? Is that actually going to happen, or is it more for the companies developing?
No, there will be a Thread logo on the products.
There will be. So, but now since Thread is only focused on that networking layer, how can, for example, I've got I guess the product, you're going to make sure they're all running the same radios. So that's one thing. So it won't work, for example, right now, at least with with Wi-Fi or Bluetooth technology. But on the application side, how can you make any guarantees there? Because it's just now you're looking at it just as a device point of view, or how does it permeate further?
No, and so
see, I guess I have a disconnect there, because there can be a lot of
and so,
confusion.
When you buy a Wi-Fi access point and you buy a laptop that has Wi-Fi in it, do you think they're going to talk to each other? Yeah, and so you haven't worried about what application, right? You expect you can run Skype over that, and if I'm on Skype and you're on Skype, we're talking just fine. If I open my web browser, I expect it to operate too. And so there's a good example of I have a common network, radio, Mac and Phi and things like that, right? But the applications are different on top. Now, let me be clear, there is a difference here in that, the benefit that Wi-Fi has and all of the things I just talked about you are in the loop, right? And so the application layer, quite frankly, is often processed by your eyeballs.
Right.
Now, we have to be able to do both in Thread. So when your light bulb talks to your light switch, there is no brain involved there. There may be a microprocessor, but he doesn't do a lot of interpretation. And so there will be, and there is out there in the world, a lot of application layers that would like to run on top of Thread. And they're very much in the business of, how should a light switch talk to a light bulb? It's just that Thread is not in that business.
Okay.
Because we don't really want to create yet another application layer. So this is the purpose of this, is to have a common unified network for these devices in the home. And then, different application layers can run over that network, and that's okay. So your light bulbs, will likely all talk the same language. That would be expected, right? But your light bulbs and your smoke detectors don't necessarily have to talk the same language, right? They can have different application layers on them, and that's okay.
Okay. So I think your analogy of the laptop, let's say, and then the wireless router in your home is a good one, because the only promise there is that if you have the right application, they're going to connect with each other.
That's right.
But now going beyond here, same thing. If you got the right application, they're going to talk to each other. So I guess that's where the brand promise ends. Is that right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing more than that.
And from our standpoint, from a Silicon Lab standpoint, not talking about the Thread group, clearly the market's going to evolve here, and it's going to solve this. Because right now I can get, we talked about the Philips Hue lights, and I can get applications that talk to my Philips Hue lights.
Yep.
I can get an application for my smartphone that talks to my thermostat and my smoke detectors. I can get an application that talks to my garage door opener. I can get an application that talks to my security system. And my appliances, and they're all individual applications. And I think we can all agree that, we're in the early part of the market, and this is normal. But, when you roll forward a few years, I don't think we're going to ask a homeowner to have 15 applications on their cell phone, so that they go, oh, which was I trying to talk to here? If I wanted to do that, I needed to open my appliance app. That's right. And that's not the promise of this anyways, right? If I'd like my lights to come on when I unlock my door, if it's after, 8 o'clock at night, well, they really need to be sharing some information there. And the user needs a simple way they can tie those things together. And so that's the next step, really, but that's not Thread's problem. Thread is going to get all these things on the same network, and then smart people are going to come along and say, aha, now I know what to do with that. And this is the promise of IP. Why is IP so successful is that we're not trying to tie the application down. We want it to be able to grow and expand, and a smart guy can come along and develop some new products, and they'll get on the network, and then the applications have to understand how to use them, right?
Hallelujah. Okay, so that makes sense, and I'm a big believer in what you're saying. I mean, the IP now in the sense of Internet Protocol is kind of a little buried here, and so just because you have an application that runs IP protocol does not mean it's going to work with Thread, and therefore that's why Thread is there, because it just needs a little bit more hand-holding for all the reasons you mentioned. Has to be reliable, has to be plug and play, has to be safe, and so forth.
That's right. And certainly from Silicon Labs' standpoint, we think the house is, I don't think it's any surprise that your house is going to have Wi-Fi in it, right? We also think there's going to be lots of uses for Bluetooth in your home, right? If you look at wearables, if you look at, healthcare and fitness and many of these sorts of things, that's a great use for Bluetooth. And for these kind of connected home applications where I need a multi-hop mesh, really long battery life, and those sorts of things, we think 15.4 is the right solution there. And so we look at the home collapsing down to having Wi-Fi, having Bluetooth, having 15.4 available, and in these access points and things. And then the consumer doesn't see the difference, right? And this is what you do on your phone today. When you open up a browser on your phone, you're not wondering if it's connecting over Wi-Fi or if it's connecting over 4G. You don't care.
No.
And that's what these networks
Unless it's my daughter eating up all my data.
Yeah, then you care at the end of the month when you get the bill. But,
Sorry.
That's right. But, the user experience has to be seamless across these different PHYs, and that's the benefit of IP here.
Yeah, and what you're saying is that's Bluetooth. I agree. I mean, different radio. There's a place for each of these radio technologies. It's not going to standardize.
No,
to one
the analysts
they have different purposes.
Yeah, the analysts and the journalists really like to write about this as a fight. And I look at your phone and say, really, when Bluetooth went into phones, it didn't mean Wi-Fi, wasn't used there. Or we said, gee, we don't need the cellular connection anymore, right? You could have multiple technologies. Yeah. And the user, as long as the user experience is good, they don't care. Right. And then the device manufacturers make the logical choice. They look at the technology and say, what is most appropriate for my device to get onto these networks and do what the consumer expects?
And if you need to integrate them, number one, that's not your job. That's not Thread's job. You're just focused on the 15.4 network, and that'll be integrated by some application that'll somehow bridge these different networks together and talk.
That's
to them. Right. Yeah. Okay, makes sense. I mean, we didn't mention that it's a mesh networking technology and all the benefits for that. Although I guess we sort of implied it from the protocols that you're using. Yep. But let's talk not IP Internet Protocol. Let's talk intellectual property. Yep. So, what is the story there?
Sure. So, Thread has a RAND RF policy, so it's royalty free to members. So members are not cross-licensing members on this technology. If you join, you're admitting that we're all going to share in this.
No matter what the contribution?
No matter what the contribution. If you're not contributing, if you're not willing to contribute, then you shouldn't join because the membership agreement is RAND RF.
And now affiliate members, though they don't really have the ability to really contribute on committees, but they also get the RAND RF blanket.
That's right.
Okay, so it's pretty simple. You're saying if you join, then you have no problems with intellectual property. The patents are granted, or use of the patents are granted to you, and all is good in the world.
Certainly, all is good among the members, right? The members aren't going to be licensing each other, right? We're all in the business of selling products, not selling licenses.
All right. So is part of the money going to be used to retain a bunch of lawyers in case you got some infringements on your Thread IP?
I hope not.
Let's hope not. Yeah. I agree. All right. Well, this is good. This clarifies a lot for me, and I think what's unique here is that you're focused on a very specific problem of, first of all, these low power networks that are found, and then more specifically found in the home. So you delineate, you draw the line around there. Below, it's pretty standardized, but above, it's kind of just not your game. So if you were to compare, the Thread to Allseen or the IIC or IPSO, I forgot to actually ask you about IPSO. Yeah, with the smart objects. Where's your
HomeKit? You'll have to have HomeKit. You're going to put them in there.
I did because I don't know what the hell HomeKit is. But anyway.
So those are those are all application layers. Yes. And so we look at those and say those are all complementary to Thread. They could run on top of Thread. And it's up to the users and device makers what's going to end up being the most appropriate application layer. So we don't really see a conflict there.
And what about with the OIC?
The Open Interconnect Consortium is also an application layer.
They go all the way down, though, don't they? Or can they be used actually just as the application?
To be fair, they haven't released anything. I haven't seen the specs, but as I understood it, I believe it's an application layer.
Okay. All right. Where can people find more about the Thread group and about joining and the benefits and what else is going on?
It's all at threadgroup.org.
Threadgroup.org.
Yeah.
That's pretty straightforward. All right. Well, and what about Twitter? And is Thread on social media?
They are
you communicating?
at the Thread group, I think. I'm going to have to look it up. But yes.
I'll put in the show notes now, just in case.
Yeah.
All right. Well, very good, Skip. Thank you. That was illuminating. It's really at least helped clarify my thinking, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Bruce.
Okay. That was a good talk with Skip Ashton. This podcast goes vertical, deep diving into different topics each week. If you prefer a more horizontal and structured approach to learning IoT business and its orbiting technologies, check out my book IoT Inc, published by McGraw-Hill, or become a certified IoT professional by completing the ICIP training and certification program. For details, just go to www.iot-inc.com. Also go to www.iot-inc.com for an analysis of this episode, links to things that were mentioned during the episode, and very importantly, the episode's PDF transcript. Just search for the name of the episode or the guest. If you're new to this podcast, subscribe. That way you'll get every week's episode delivered straight to your device. Or, if you've been listening for a while, there are 3 ways you can support the show. You can leave a rating or a review on iTunes. Just go to iot-inc.com/iTunes. It only takes 1 click to leave a rating, a little bit longer to leave a review. You can share it on social. I'm on LinkedIn, to a lesser extent on Twitter. And of course, you can support the show by buying my book, IoT Inc, or the ICIP training and certification program. It's how I pay the bills. Next week's episode is the 4G of IoT with Patrice Lepowski of Orange. Hope you can join me then. I'm your host, Bruce Sinclair. Thank you for listening. Till next week, may your path to IoT business be a reliable one.
You have been listening to the IoT Inc Business Show.